Sit-Down News. Today I'm going to be speaking to you about Bobby Luisi. For those of you who don't know who Bobby is, and many probably do, Bobby has the Bobby Luisi Show, and I consider Bobby a dear friend. We'll get more to that later. Bobby grew up in Boston's North End, which is the Little Italy section of Boston. His father, also named Bobby, that was called Big Bob, was around the Angelos, and the Angelos were part of the Patriarcha family. By the age of 11, Bobby began working for the Angelos, and he was servicing some of their cigarette and pool tables that they had. As he explained on several interviews, he said that it was just a job that he had after school, but little did he know that was his first introduction into mob life. 2 years later, Bobby found himself in the back of some strip joints that his father ran, and he was hanging out in the dressing rooms, watching the strippers get dressed. And by the age of 16, his father got him an apartment down in the North End, and he was hanging around all the local wise guys down there. He said he started going around them every day, dressing up nice, shaving, and he felt that at that point he was being schooled or groomed, as we would say, for the life. But in contrast to emulating his father, he had a love for carpentry. So Bobby got into carpentry and legitimate work, and by the age of 20, he obtained a builder's license. And I think by a few years later, he purchased a three-family home that he built in East Boston, and he began building houses on Martha's Vineyard off the Cape in Massachusetts from 1984 to 1990. So in 1993, Bobby began, I guess out of peer pressure, left the legit life and went back into the street and went into the cocaine business. By 96, he was already a millionaire. But during that same time period, the Patriarcha family was having an eternal war. And that war was between Frank Salemi and Joseph Russo, J.R. they call him. Both Bobby and his father were on the Frank Salemi faction of that war. And during this time, and while he was in the drug business, Bobby started building up a crew of his own, aside from his father's crew. But during the same time, there was another battle going on, and that battle was between father and son, specifically Bobby and his father. So on November 6th, 1995, a younger guy by the name of Damian Clemente and his driver, Vincent Perez, walked into a restaurant called the 99 Restaurant and Pub that was in Charleston, in Boston. And previously, the night before, Damian and a couple of guys lumped up one of Bobby's father's guys. And there was an escalation of a beef over that. Bobby obviously was trying to de-escalate it. And, but as they went into this place, this Damian, who did he bump into was Bobby's father and his whole crew. And panicking, the kid called his father up, but his driver, Vincent, made a call to Bobby. Bobby told them, pay the bill and go out the back door if they didn't see you. But unfortunately, this Damien called his father, excuse me, in a panic, and the father, whose name is Anthony Clemente, flew down to the restaurant. Once he was down there, he got into words with Bobby's father and his crew and wind up pulling out a pistol and unfortunately shooting Bobby's father, Bobby's stepbrother, Roman, his cousin and uncle, Anthony and Ricky Sarro, and a family friend named Sonny Pelosi. Everyone with the exception of Bobby's cousin, Ricky, wind up getting killed from the gunshots that night. And his cousin Ricky got shot in the shoulder and he survived, only because they ran out of bullets. And both Anthony Clemente and his son Damien pulled out guns. And it was Damien who fired the shot that killed Bobby's father. And as a result of those murders and a trial, both father and son, Clemente, received life sentences. So the next day, and the very next day, Bobby went right back to the street and he started, grabbing whatever businesses and earnings his father's crew had, and he took it in as his own. Eventually, he was proposed with the Patriarchas, but Bobby had a beef with a skipper in that family, and they were gonna leave Bobby in limbo, as they say, and he was not going to be straightened out. They were going to block it. So with that being said, Bobby reached out through a friend to Pete Gotti and explained his situation, but Pete didn't want to help him because the Patriarchas had a seat on a commission and he didn't want no trouble that way. And next, Bobby knew someone who knew Ralphie Natale. Ralphie Natale was the acting boss in Philly at the time for Joey Molino. And from a meeting with Ralph Natale, Bobby got to meet Georgie Borghese, and Georgie, excuse me, at the time was the consigliere in Philly for Joey Molino. And then eventually Bobby got to meet the rest of the guys and Joey Molino himself. Joey initially wanted to borrow $100,000 off of Bobby. There's been a lot of false rumors and people trying to say that Bobby paid for his button because eventually Bobby got straightened out with the Philly mob. That's not true. Bobby never gave up the money. He had told that story to a patriarchal who put that out there. But what Bobby did say was that I'll contribute money once you straighten myself out, and I'm a captain and straighten my guys out. Like everybody else, I'll contribute money, and that's how that went down. So Bobby never paid the $100,000, and he did not pay for his bond. So what had happened is that, like I said, Joey, with the stipulation, straightened Bobby out, made him a captain after a while, straightened got Bobby's guys out, and according to what was said, he was to be with their family for 2 years while up in Boston, and he would be the Boston faction of the Philly family. And then he could break off and create his own family, according to what Molino told Bobby. What they did, not that it's unheard of, but it's very rare, that a family would place a crew in an area that another family controls, which Patriarcha had that whole area, but nevertheless, they did it. And at that time, the Philly mob had a member who they bumped up to a capital regime by the name of Ronald Ronnie Previtt. And this guy used to be a Philadelphia state police officer. I don't know how he or who straightened him out, but I think Ralph Natale had him around, and sorry, I think it was John Stanford had Previtt around and straightened him out, and he was on the Stanford side and the Stanford faction of the war in Philly between Joey Molino and his crew and John Stanford. John Stanford was kind of put in that position by the Gambino family, and he was, put as the boss of Philly there with their, they condoned it. And obviously Joey Molino and that crew were not having it, and they went to war with them. And Previtt was on the opposing side. How he switched over after the war and got in with the Molino faction, and not only got in with them, they promoted him and gave him a position. It's unbelievable, but it happened. And supposedly, they didn't notice at the time, but Ronnie Previtt was a FBI informant and was getting money from the government to hand over and kick up to Joey Molino and his crew, and that's most likely the reason why they kept him around. And what had happened is that Bobby, upon meeting Previtt, didn't like him right away, and his antennas were up. And there's a funny conversation where he explains that Joey made him a capo, and he grabbed this guy Previtt at a party one night. He said, you're a capo. He says, where's your guys? I'm a capo. I'm here with a bunch of guys. Where's your guys? How come I never met these guys? I want to be introduced to them. And this Previtt's answer was, oh, don't worry, I got guys, or whatever. It's not the greatest answer. And like I said, unbeknown to all these guys at the time was that this guy was a FBI informant. And so sometime during 1998, around when Bobby gets straightened out thereafter, Previtt pitched his idea of a drug connection that he had up in Boston. He was definitely anticipating he brought this to Molino with the anticipation that Molino was going to involve Bobby Luisi, because obviously the FBI was looking to take down also Bobby Luisi. And Bobby was, for all intents and purposes, putting him on a pay me no mind list with this until both Joey Molino and Georgia Borghese kind of insisted that Bobby deal with this guy in his drug business. And as a result of that, Bobby kind of caved into, his superiors telling him he had to do it. And he met with Previtt and Previtt's drug connection, which was a guy that went by the name of Irish Mike Sullivan. And Bobby began doing some cocaine transactions with this Irish Mike. And in June of 1999, Bobby, 3 members of his crew, Joey Molino and some of the administration, some of their members take a pinch, and lo and behold, Irish Mike is really FBI agent Mike McGowan, who was working along with Previtt to get Bobby, and not only Bobby, the rest of the Philly crew. So initially, Bobby thought he was only facing about 10 to 12 years for the drug case, but a guy in prison had told him he heard something about an indictment coming down for some murders, and Bobby spoke to his legal team. One of the guys on his legal team was a former AUSA and now working with the defense, and he looked into it and told Bobby that it was true, and on one of the murders, they kind of had Bobby cold. So Bobby decided to speak to the feds at that time. And he goes on to say that the negotiations didn't work out, and they obviously were not on the same page. And Bobby never finished his cooperation agreement with them. And he explained that he really didn't want to be an informant, and he just couldn't go through with it at that time. So Bobby winded up going to trial by 2002, ultimately getting convicted and getting sentenced to 20 years. And then he got something with good time and through an appeal, and he winds up only serving about 13 years, 9 months. And he served that time in the WITSEC unit, most likely because of the profits that he had with the government. He could no longer be in population because that material became part of the discovery material, and guys know, they wouldn't be able to put him in general population. And during his time in prison, he received a degree in theology. He wrote a book. He taught a GED class. He also created some courses for guys that were getting ready to be released. And he worked as a head cook, I guess, in the mess hall. But, Bobby had some kind of spiritual revelation, and that's his personal business. I think those things are people's personal business. If they want to talk about them, as I did, they could. And it prompted him to denounce or reject that life that he once knew. He no longer wanted to be a part of that life. And upon release, Bobby went into the witness protection program. Specifically, he was relocated to Memphis, Tennessee. And naturally, when you enter that program, you have a name change. And Bobby's name was Alonzo Esposito. And how we know this is that Bobby first started working and went back to his love of woodworking and became a cabinet maker, but ultimately putting his theology degree to use, he got into the local churches and started his own ministry and became a pastor. And over time, I don't know exactly how, but it came out that Alonzo Esposito was really Bobby Luisi, a Caporegine from Boston with the Philly mob. And the media had a little bit of a frenzy over it. There was a lot of articles written about Bobby. You could go online and see those for yourself. And, it was his story, as I wrote, of redemption. So Bobby at one point leaves Memphis. I think in 2017, he goes to Florida, but a year later, goes back to Boston and goes to Florida, and then goes back to Boston in 2018. And his reason being was that he missed his children and he wanted to be around his family. And he also reconnected with one of his soldiers, and a guy in his crew, a very loyal guy by the name of Paul Tanzel. And for those of you who watched the Bobby Luisi show. His co-partner is Paul Tanzo. I'm sure everyone knows who Paul is. Very good guy. And so they start the Bobby Luisi show, and in my opinion, has become very successful. I had, also been on previously Bobby's show, and Bobby and Paul have been on Tom and my show, the NBA Department. And I wrote about Bobby and Paul's friendship, which is very rare, as they have a genuine friendship and a genuine respect and love for one another. And I think that's evident for anyone who watches the show and watches them interact with one another. They are both trying to do positive things. They're trying to help people with addictions. They are working along with Boston business owners and the Catholic Church, trying to put together some sober houses and some housing for people who are addicted. And I think that's a good thing. It's kind of like paying back and righting their wrongs, which we all should do. So as I said, in the past, I have been on Bobby's show and Bobby has been on ours. Unfortunately, due to federal parole restrictions, I can no longer associate with known felons. So I had to rely on what I remember from talking to Bobby and interviews that he did to write the blog. And I wrote, with that being said, I hope that Bobby and Paul both enjoy the blog, and I hope they enjoy this podcast about them as well. I wish them both nothing but success and health. So with that being said, for those of you who have not subscribed to the NBA Department, you could do that. If you have not subscribed to this channel, you could do that below. I hope you enjoyed the story about Bobby and Paul. They're two great guys. Check them out on the Bobby Luisi show on YouTube as well. I hope everybody's enjoying their Saturday. I'm enjoying mine. Ciao.